Behind me are some of the world's oldest strength tools, called maces or gadas. And in this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to get started using them. If you want strength, power, and hypertrophy in your obliques and core as a whole, this is the best place to start. So stick around to the end of the video, where you'll get a free routine with tutorials and everything you need to know to get started. Let's dive right into it. So before we talk about how the mace can impact our training, we need to talk about what qualities we actually want to gain. So for most people, when they think about rotational training, they think of one of two exercises, or exercise types, rather. It's either going to be things like anti-rotation, a la Palloff press or side planks, or side-to-side rotation, like in a Russian twist or a wood chopper. And these are fine, at least the second one is, but overall they miss a bigger picture. In the latter example, moving from side to side is of course rotation. No one's going to deny that. But the problem is, if you look at the anatomy of the obliques, they don't just wrap around our body, but instead move on angles. With your external and internal obliques having slightly different variations even in and of themselves. So if we want to train a muscle, it makes sense that we would train in the direction of that muscle. Moving from side to side does not equate to up and down or low to high. The mace, though, when we do our casts, swinging it as usually done, we're moving from coil to coil. Now, what is a coil? A coil is your end range of rotation. So at either point where you can't move anymore on a given angle. The end point of a coil is how far back and down or back and up you can stretch your obliques. In something like a shield cast, the mace goes all the way from the highest position your body can allow to the lowest position, training your core dynamically. What's more is with things like the shield cast, gamma cast, and mill, you're not just loading your obliques, but also your transabs, erector spinae, and rec abs, as everything has to work together in order to constantly brace the swing as the weight moves in front and behind your body. We've talked about before how kettlebells are so valuable because of the dynamic nature of their swings and how the force changes depending on where you are in the arc. The mace is no exception, as there will be float points and there will be points of high resistance where you have to generate force. This flow and crash is exactly what we want, especially for athletes who have dynamic changes in what their core has to be fortitude against in their own routines and practice, of course. Unlike things such as the Russian twist or the cable wood chopper, maces also require a high degree of power and generation from the hips, shoulders, and spine instead of just relying on the core. So what do I mean by that? If you're a striker, a thrower, or even a sprinter, you know full well the power is generated from the hips. Being able to move just from side to side, keeping your T-spine in place, doesn't do nearly as much as you think it would for developing rotational power, even though you're rotating. In order to accurately throw a mace that's not going to tear out your shoulder, you need to generate power from the ground up. Getting a nice, rooted, yet adaptable pivot in your feet, hips able to rotate and turn dynamically and as you choose, in conjunction with T-spine, lumbar coordination, cervical spine with your head turned and able to look at where your target is, and power generation from your shoulders, means that the rotation we're getting from the mace is fully functional. Now that word likes to get thrown around a lot, what's functional, what's not, and we did a whole video on the matter. But shorten it, the mace is more functional because it's more applicable. We're practicing patterns that you will use in the sequence you'll use them in the field, but in a way that's progressively loadable. Now, why is any of this better than anti-rotation, like you would see in a Palloff press, which I'm sure some strength and conditioning coaches brought to you before? Well, that's because anti-rotation isn't really much of a thing. Now, I know that might be hard to believe, because after all, if you're a grappler, you know full well you want to be able to stop someone from turning you around and taking your back. But wouldn't you rather be strong enough to completely reverse what they do? I mean, much like Bruce Lee said, flow like water. You don't want to just stop stone fast and push on forward, but instead you want a core that's adaptable in being able to overpower your opponent, not just meet them at face value. That's not to say that there's never a time to rotate. I mean, human flags are super cool and require an anti-side bend, which, at least how I train, is very different from normal rotation. After all, side bending is just that, bending to the side. It's not a rotation. That being said, the mace can still train conventional beans like that. Doing side twists or any kind of offset work is going to help the core to be able to brace and resist a side bend or rotation if that's something you really care about and want to train. But, like I said, we also are trained to overcome those forces. Now, of course, the mace doesn't only train your core. Your shoulders and arms play a massive role in swinging the mace as well. I mean, it's evident. You have to attach it to your arms in order to swing the tool effectively in the slightest. And because of that, I can credit a lot of my clients' shoulder gains, both in hypertrophy and strength, as well as tricep gains and bicep gains, to swinging of heavy maces. This adaptability allows for more efficient pitchers, strikers, and even grapplers because the shoulder has to move as a ball and socket. Compare that to exercises such as a front raise or lateral raise, which are isolating one specific muscle and treating that ball and socket more like a single hinge. Dynamic nature of the mace forces 3D shoulders and adaptability across anything. I mean, one of the most common injuries we see in American adults is rotator cuff related. Either that be tears, destruction, what have you. You know what you have to do in order to effectively train a rotator cuff? Rotate. The mace has to rotate your shoulder. If I'm moving from one side of my body to the other, my shoulder is dynamically shifting, just like it would with other rotational tools like the rope. Not only does this help with throwing mechanics, but it offers long-term prehab for your shoulder. Most YouTube gurus or Instagram fitness guys you see when talking about rehab are going to be talking about nice and light objects moving at decently high rep ranges to encourage blood flow. That has its place, but the mace, you can get them as light as 5 pounds, which I don't recommend. It's a little weird of a tool. But you can also progressively overload all the way up to 114. That's crazy. And if you want strong shoulders, that overload is invaluable. Now, of course, maces aren't just swinging. Pressing, pulling, you can even squat with it just like you would any other object, are highly useful skills that, when combined, make the mace one of the most effective single tools you can buy. I mean, if I had to start all the way over, I would absolutely be using a mace. What it does better than just about any other tool and is generalized enough to replace a lot of different pieces of equipment. You can do your curls, your rows, and even your presses just like how you would a kettlebell or barbell even, but with the added offset that trains cores dynamically and forces constant new challenges. I mean, the mace you can also progressively overload just in the one tool because it's a leverage item. Holding closer to the head is going to require more strength and effort in order to press. Moving closer to the head is going to require less strength and effort to press, while moving down the handle is going to make the fulcrum longer, thus requiring more force. Now, I'm not saying the mace can fully replace anything. I love my landmine and kettlebells, but a heavy-ass mace clean and press is fantastic and makes you feel awesome, which, if you've seen any of my other content, you know that is super important to training. I mean, you can't hold that object and press it overhead without feeling like you're some Viking or Spartan warrior. There's something super cathartic and visceral about training with a tool known for combat and still used by combat sport practitioners even today. It's a part of history that can't go unnoticed and has invaluable effects in any sort of training. So there you have it. Everything you need to know about the Macebell. We've gone over how it impacts our core, our shoulders, our hips, and even how you can use it as a replacement or augmentation of your current training. So if you want to get in fight shape, click the link in the description for the 100% free Intro to Mace program, where all you need is your body weight and a mace. And I'll show you how you incorporate it into routines and build a pretty nasty Spartan-like physique in the process. If you liked this video and you want to see more weekly content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so that I know you want more. We cover superhero style fitness, training philosophies, and try to teach you about workout equipments like the mace that you might not know about. So until next time, grab your sledgehammer, buy a mace, whatever you want, and start swinging.